Howdy folks, and welcome back to the channel, welcome back to another tutorial episode of War in the East 2. So we have seen about production, we have discussed about the supply network, railways, rail yards, ports, depots. We have seen how to kind of direct the flow of freight from the national supply sources to the priority for depots, and we are missing one last, let's say, chapter or aspect of the logistics of War in the East 2, and this is how do units physically take the freight from the depots and bring it to themselves. I want to be very direct. This could be slightly difficult to grasp, so if you have any question or doubt, please let me know in the comments below, because it took me a while to understand how this thing works. But first of all, you need to take into account one important aspect of your units, and this aspect is the supply priority. Which, as you've seen in one of the previous tutorials, can be let's say quickly visualized by clicking on this button here. But as always, I have prepared this spreadsheet in Excel to make things easier. Now, there are 5 levels of supply priorities, and well, sorry, this should be freight, because freight contains also supplies. And based on the priority, a unit will receive a percentage of freight that corresponds to what it needs. So level 4 priority, so supply priority of level 4 means that the units will receive up to 120% of what they need if they did not move, and if they ended up the previous turn not being next to an enemy controlled hex. Otherwise they will just take 90% of what they need. Level 3 up to 90%, level 2 up to 70%, and so on and so forth. And this is crucial to keep in mind to understand the next phase, which is physically how do units grab the freight from depots. This occurs in the logistics phase, and every unit can run up to 5 I call them roles. We can call them admin checks. Admin checks because they are affected. The probability of passing these checks is affected by the admin skill of their commanding officer, their leaders, their generals. And there are 5 of them, and during each of these 5 roles, units can get up to 20% of what they need. And what they need is actually divided between supplies, fuel, manpower, vehicles, and ammunition. So 5 rolls up to 20%, which means that if a unit has really no supplies at all, no ammo or no fuel, if this unit passes all 5 of these rolls or checks, the unit will get, and let's assume it is a priority 4, a level 4 supply priority, and you're right, supplies is the supplies priority, yeah. And it's a level 4, it will get 100% of what it needs. How do these roles work? Because there is the supply priority level 4, level 3, level 2, and so on, and you may notice that when the next turn for the AI is running, you will see like supplying high priority units, then medium priority units, and low priority units. But the way things work are a bit different than what is shown in the logistics phase. And as always, I have prepared here this example that should make it easier for you folks to understand how does the resupplying of units occurs during the logistics phase. So assuming we have these 5 units, A, B, C, D, and E, and each unit has a different supply priority. Let's assume that this unit is located right next to Berlin, so it has access to the national supply source. So there is no risk of running low of freight in the depots. Now, to make the math easier, I assume that all of these 5 units have already 10 supplies. And because of the different priority, they can receive a different amount of supplies at every roll. And to make, as always, to keep it easy, I assume that all these units need 100 tons of supplies, and because they have 10, they have 10% of what they need. Now, in the first roll, what happens? The unit can get up to 20% of what they need. So in this case, let's assume that they all get 20 tons of supplies, because this is 20% of what they need, assuming that they all pass this first roll. And now what we have that unit A, which has a priority of 0, which means that it can only receive up to 30% of what it needs. Unit A has already reached the maximum amount of supplies that it can receive from this specific depot during the logistics phase, which means that during the second roll, Unit A will not receive additional supplies, but while all of the other units will receive supplies. And one thing that I did not mention is that the first unit to get supplies is, in this case, the unit with the highest supply priority. So I hope I'm not confusing you folks, but let's divide everything into sections. The first unit that gets the supplies is the one that has the highest priority, and then it goes down until level 0. Level 0 is supplied, it reaches its maximum capacity that can get, and so in the next roll it won't receive anything. Now, supplying unit E, D, and C, and B, unit B now has received the maximum amount of supplies that it can get based on the level 1 supply priority, which means that on the third roll, unit B and A, of course, will not receive any more additional supplies. And this goes on for 2 more turns, assuming that, of course, all 5 units all pass the roll, the leader check, the admin check during each segment of the logistics phase. I know this was kind of complicated for me to understand, but hopefully I made it easier for you folks to equally understand. Now, if we go back to the map, and if you want to know, if you want to get an idea of the what I would call the supply map, you can just press the number 8 on your keyboard, not on the numpad, but on the keyboard. And when you press it, you'll see that all these beautiful lines will pop up on the map. The white lines indicate the flow of freight from the national supply source to the depots and ports. The blue lines indicate the flow of freight between an export port and an import port, while the red lines indicate the distribution of supplies from level 4 depots to the frontline units. Also, one thing that you will see is that so first of all, this gives you an indication of which depots are supplying which units. But you also see that some units do not have any red line, like for instance the 11th Infantry Division, which means that this division was not supplied in the last logistics phase. And based on the on the basic info box already of the unit, we can see why. Because if we go to the first to the superior HQ, the first Army Corps has a supply priority of 2, and as we have seen, the units with a supply priority of 2 can only receive up to 70% of what they need, and in this case the 11th Infantry Division has 77% of the general supplies and has 113% of fuel and 133% of ammunition. So this explains why the 11th Infantry Division was not supplied in the last logistics phase. And yeah, so this gives you an overview, and if you want to be more precise, you can also activate the logistics map to see precisely the location of the depots. Having said that, we can have a look at a more detailed supply windows, and to access this you can click on the name of the unit, and you can click on the only button that I never explained in all of my previous tutorials, which is of course the supply details. The supply details will give you this overview, this window, which is divided into 3, let's say, segments. In the first segment, you get an overview of the supply situation of the unit, and it's kind of easy to understand, because in unit you have the amount of supplies, fuel, ammo expressed in tons, and then you have the number of vehicles and the number of support elements. And here is the percentage of what the unit has compared to what the unit requires. Used. Before going to used this, I need to introduce the other part of the tutorials, which is precisely how do units get supplies from depots. There are 2 ways that units can use to do it, and these ways depend on the distance between the unit and the depot. Units that are located within 3 hexes from one depot will use horses and carts to go to the depot, grab the freight, and bring it back to the units. The advantage of doing this is that units will not use trucks, will not use those very same elements that are required for movement, especially if I'm talking about the motorized and panzer divisions. The downside of using horses is that I would call it the supply cost doubles, which means that the amount of supplies consumed by the unit is just double, because this mimics the fact that during the previous week those horses needed to be fed, and this of course consumes more supplies. So that's why units that use animals will receive in general much less supplies compared to units using trucks, or compared to units receiving freight from the depots and using the trucks of the depot. Vice versa, units which are located in a range that is higher than 3 hexes from the depot will use trucks, so vehicles. Either the trucks from the vehicle pool of the depot, or if they are motorized, like the 6th Panzer Division or the 36th Motorized Division, they will use their own vehicles, which of course is a problem, because sure, they will get more supplies, but they will increase the wear and tear on the vehicles, and they will also reduce the amount of movement points. If some vehicles are lost, the lost vehicles will have a negative impact on the amount of movement points that the unit will have at the beginning of the next turn. And we can have a look at the 6th Panzer Division to get it. Now, the division had 98% of the required vehicles. But during the last logistics phase, the unit used 1690 of its own vehicles and lost 338 to attrition. Most likely these were just damaged, because we still have nearly 100% of the required vehicle. But of course, sorry, I cannot say this because I don't know whether the 6th Panzer Division began the campaign with more vehicles than what it actually needed. So I can't really say this. But as you can see, the 6th Panzer Division lost quite a few vehicles, and it actually used more than half of its vehicle park to just grab freight and get resupplied. And as you can see, that the 6th Panzer Division now only has 31 movement points, which is barely slightly more than half of what it had at the beginning of the campaign. The second segment here is the supply details. So precisely from which depots this unit received its freight. Now on the map, on the supply map, even if the unit received freight from different depots, the red line will indicate which is the depot that provided the highest amount of freight to the unit, which in this case is the depot in Tilsit. And again, these information are quite easy to grasp, easy to understand. The range is the distance in hexes between the unit and the depot. The MP is the number of movement points that the unit needs to spend to reach physically the depot. Freight received is the amount of freight that the unit received. Freight lost is the amount of freight that got lost on the way from the depot to the unit. And then vehicle received indicates the number of vehicles that the unit received from the depot vehicle pool, and then that it has incorporated in its own vehicle park for whatever reason. And the last section here is, let's say, it goes into the details of how much of everything this unit has received. In particular, it has received, out of the total freight that it has received, 18 tons of supplies, 99 tons of fuel, no ammunition, no vehicles from the pool of the depot, and 521 men, which correspond to 809 tons of freight. It consumed 104 tons of supplies, and it has failed one of the 5 roles, one of the 5 admin checks, because it's written here, admin failures 1. Now, if a unit fails the admin check, it means that it will not receive this up to 20% of freight that it would need during the logistics phase. Now, the concept of penalty is honestly still unknown to me. I've asked this question on the forum, and even people on the forum are not really sure of what it indicates, because apparently I have seen people getting penalty ranging from 0 to 14. And from what I could understand, the penalty is like a modifier that affects the entire chain of command, and the penalty is based on 2 variables: whether the unit is out of range, and or whether the HQ to which the unit is attached to is overcrowded. And I can show you this example here. This regiment of the Totenkopf division has a penalty of 9 because it's quite far away from its HQ, while this other regiment doesn't have any penalty because it's most likely in range. And also, interestingly, I didn't mention this. You see here that replacements -45. This means that this regiment of the Totenkopf SS division brought back 45 men. These are the actual men. So if you see a negative number, it means that the division donated some of its men to the, I would call it the manpower pool. And going back to the 6th Panzer Division, we do have the last section here. Now, the no freight, no trucks, and so on indicates the percentage of what the unit needed of freight, trucks, fuel, and so on and so forth, and that did not receive in the last logistics turn. What do I mean with that? I mean that if the unit, for instance, needed to receive absolutely 20% of freight and did not receive it, then you will see here no freight 20, because it needed badly 20% and did not need it. For trucks and manpower, the number will actually tell you the precise amount of trucks and men that the unit needed and that did not receive in the last logistics turn. So this is just giving you a warning, you know, because as long as this number is 0, pretty much nothing happens. If it gets higher, you may have a problem. So yeah, always keep in mind to check this window if you see that some units are undersupplied or they don't have movement points. And yeah, with this, folks, I'm at the end, and with this we finished the logistics chapter of this tutorial series. And well, as always, I hope you guys are still enjoying this series, and thank you very much for watching, thank you very much for supporting the channel. And before leaving, I should tell you that in the next tutorial we will combine the two information of the last sub-chapters. So the air war and the logistics, because we will talk about air supplies, which can always come handy but are always risky. And until then, folks, I wish you all the best. Stay safe, take care, and I'll see you all in the next tutorial.